What's up, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you are doing well and hope you are enjoying your weekend. Let's jump into today's topic, and I want to go over my grades for both the offense and the defense. I'm not going to go over them in total because you can find all of my grades over at PackerReport.com. If you're unfamiliar, this is, I believe, the fifth year that I've done this, basically going through and grading every single Green Bay Packer player on every single play through the entirety of the season. It's a painstaking process. It's definitely a labor of love. I enjoy going through. So a lot of times I'm watching the same play over and over and over. A lot of times it's 11 plus times to catch every single player to see how they performed on that play. Most of the time, you know, a player on a given play is going to have a neutral grade, maybe a slight positive, slight negative. Every once in a while, a player will have a really huge play that is obviously a huge positive. Every once in a while, they'll have a huge negative, which will again be a huge negative play. So you tabulate all those scores out through the course of a week and then a year and etc. And you start to paint a pretty good picture. Now, is it a perfect process? Certainly not. I'm certainly not perfect at grading, everything, right? Like I'm going to miss some things unequivocally, but I think there is a ton of value in having the same player grade everyone on every play throughout the course of the season, really throughout almost, basically a half decade now. It gives me a unique perspective because I'm going through and again watching each of these players individually on every single play. And again, I think I use this example, right? Like, no offense to my mom, but she has no idea what she's watching when she's watching football. Even if my mom watched every single player on every single play for 5 years, I would think that she'd be able to put some observations together that would at least be noteworthy, right? So, like I said, it's not a perfect way to do it, and you might say, well, you don't know the play call. I'm not grading the play call or the execution on that specific play call. I'm grading players on what they did usually in a competitive situation, meaning if there's a wide receiver in a corner going for a 50-50 ball, did the wide receiver, did the corner win? Like, how did the corner cover a wide receiver when it's man-to-man coverage? How did the wide receiver, get out of man-to-man coverage in that same situation? Like, did the running back, select the right hole? Did he have good vision on the play? Like, there's plenty that you can, obviously gauge from a quarterback standpoint. I'm not grading if like he went through his progressions correctly, right? I have no idea what those progressions are, but I can tell you when he got to his third progression, did he throw an accurate ball or did he throw it into the dirt? Did he look at a wide receiver and miss him entirely? Or, did he hit him in stride? Like, those are all things that you can easily grade by watching the tape. So not perfect, but I think it has a ton of value. Enough about that though. Make sure to check out the grades at Packer Report. But here were some of my big takeaways from this past week. And as always, I'll be doing this each week. Some days, some weeks I may do separate videos for offense and defense, but today we're combining it into one overall video. And I think the first thing that I want to go over here is that if this felt so insanely uncharacteristic of a Packers team that went to an NFC Championship game a season ago, it's because it entirely was. First of all, this game offensively graded lower for me than any game offensively a season ago. So 18 games last season, and this would have been the lowest rated offensive performance of any of those games. So obviously not a great start there. Defensively, this would have been the third worst performance. I thought the games against Tampa Bay and Minnesota last season were worse defensive performances than this one, although it was very close to the Minnesota game. You could argue either way. I did have the Tampa Bay game rated slightly lower, but still, obviously very poor performance from the defense, and it was my worst overall graded or would have been my worst graded game overall, offense plus defense, of any game a season ago. So if this felt abnormal, if this didn't feel anything like 2020, it's because it wasn't, at least for me in my grades, lowest grade of any game a season ago. So probably not going to continue that way. You would think that Green Bay would be able to get things together and Detroit would be a good way to do that, but there were a lot of concerns. There were very few bright spots, but let's jump into that from an offensive standpoint and go over some of those offensive bright spots. And really, at the end of the day, there was one. Elgton Jenkins had a really nice game, plus 1.25 grade. And I thought he did everything well. There were very few negative graded plays. I thought he held up well at left tackle. Very tough to gauge any of the offensive linemen from a run blocking standpoint, just because Green Bay hardly attempted to run the ball. That's a difficult situation. Even you have to remember, like, pass protection. The Saints were able to tee off the vast majority of the game, knowing it was going to be a pass play because of down distance, score, time of, like, all of it, right? It just went against the Packers and certainly their offensive line. So Elgton Jenkins, by far and away the standout. There was only two other players who had a grade over plus 0.25, which, and both of them had plus 0.3 grades, which is an okay game. Like, that's an okay game. That's how I'd put it. Like, a little bit above average, just slightly above average. Only two players, Jordan Love and Randall Cobb, both of whom earned the majority of those grades. Well, obviously all of Love's, but most of Cobb's in garbage time, when it completely didn't matter and the Saints were playing vanilla and the Packers were just trying to string some stuff together. Those were the only two players had grades over plus 0.25. That's it. Elgton Jenkins, really great game. Randall Cobb and Jordan Love put on a decent performance in garbage time. You might say, well, Andy, Jordan Love had a big fumble at the end. Yeah, he did. I definitely graded him down for that on that play. I gave him a little bit more accident forgiveness there because ball security in that situation is a little less integral because you're losing the game anyway, right? He's just going out and trying to make a play. And more importantly, I thought that was more of an egregious play by the offensive line. He's trying to make a play, get rid of the football. He kind of got hit from the side. Yes, you still have to take care of the football in that situation. Like I said, it was a negative grade, but nothing that tanked his score or anything like that. I thought Randall Cobb overall through the course of the game had a couple nice routes, had the nice catch from Jordan Love in garbage time, but there just wasn't much to write home about. Like a plus 0.3 grade, I'm normally not even telling you guys about those players because it's such a nondescript performance. Usually, a couple okay plays here, mostly average the rest of the game, but because this was such a poor performance, you get to hear about Jordan Love and Randall Cobb because nobody else played well in any way, shape, or form. On the flip side, offensively, my lowest graded player in the game as a whole was Aaron Rodgers by quite a bit, quite a big margin, negative 2.5 grade. Now, as I'll always disclaim to you, quarterbacks have the highest variance, right? Like, they have a pretty important play on almost every pass play. Obviously, running plays, they don't have much of a grade in those situations, but they have a much greater variance. They can have a very high grade or a very low grade dependent upon how they perform. So some of those will inherently be higher or lower because of the position. But again, lowest graded player in the game was Rodgers, and this would have been his second lowest graded game from a season ago, behind only Tampa Bay in week 6 last year. So not a great performance from Aaron, and a few different things, right? Uncharacteristic mistakes. Yeah, he took the double nut shot on the one. However, he was also trying to make a jump pass far to his left across his body to Davante Adams, which is probably not the best idea in that situation anyway. So that was one. And then two, the interception to MVS. Even if the safety wasn't there, the ball to MVS wasn't. The corner probably had a better opportunity at the ball than MVS anyway. Just a poor decision in a game that was still 17-3 at that point, and during both interceptions, right? Like, Green Bay had an opportunity to climb back into that game. They drove down the field. Rodgers had the mistake, interception. They get the ball back. They force the New Orleans Saints to punt. They get the ball back, and then Rodgers has the other interception to MVS. So it was only a 2-score game at that point. If they go down and score touchdowns on those 2 drives, it's a tie game. It just is what it is. So Green Bay had no right to win this game the way they played overall as a team, but it starts and ends with Aaron Rodgers, and he had a poor performance. And he also had just a couple plays where if he hits guys in stride, they get good pickups, and instead he was impatient looking for a big shot play down the field, and it just didn't work out. My 2 other lowest graded players, Allen Lazard and MVS, both of them really struggled to get off of coverage in this game. Allen Lazard specifically, he had a couple nice catches, but there were like run blocking from Lazard in this game. Just the effort wasn't there. He had just uncharacteristic blocking from one of the players that's been one of the best blockers at wide receiver on this team. And then again, for the most part, struggled to separate from the defense, the corners, defensive backs, however you want to put it. MVS, same thing, right? He had a really nice catch on a 4th down early in the game. They didn't really do much outside of that. And I just think if you add up all the plays where he failed to gain separation, it was a fairly large net negative. So Rodgers negative 2.5, Lazard negative 0.55, MVS negative 0.5. So if you think of it like an okay play is a plus 0.1. So it's like he had basically 5 worse bad plays than he had good plays. So that's how you kind of look at that. As far as the rookies go, I thought Royce Newman had about a neutral grade and actually had a 0.0 grade, a complete neutral grade. I actually thought he played really well despite the play where he whiffed and gave up the pressure on Aaron Rodgers on the first interception. Outside of that, he would have graded well into the positive. And then I had Myers as a slight negative, slightly below average. Nothing egregious, definitely some things he can improve upon. I thought he was a better pass protector than he was a run blocker. He really failed to move anyone in the run game. A lot of that was in garbage time because, again, Green Bay didn't run the ball much. But overall, I thought there was some area for improvement there from Myers. Defensively, Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander, Adrian Amos all had pretty solid grades, somewhere between 0.5 and 0.65, all three of them. Outside of that, not much. Preston Smith had a nice game. I thought he started well, then kind of tapered off. I'm sure some of the heat and weather, I'm sure got to him a little bit. And he was also going against 2 of the best offensive tackles in football, in Ramczyk and Teron Armstead. So I can certainly understand that. So Clark, Alexander, Amos, and a little bit of Preston, I thought had good games, but a lot of poor performances. Kingsley Keke was my lowest graded player. Just got completely moved around by the Saints offensive line. You basically couldn't have had him in, like you shouldn't have had him in against the run in that game. He got completely blown off the line far more often than not and just couldn't hold up, and then didn't provide anything as a pass rusher either. Kevin King was my second lowest graded player. Of course, beat deep on the touchdown again, which was very eerily similar to the Scotty Miller play. Jonathan Garvin was my third lowest rated player. Frankly, just didn't look like he had any right being on the football field. I mean, just, inability to hold up at the point of attack, no pass rush plan whatsoever. He just literally looked like he wasn't ready. And bar none, no more, no less than that. He just didn't look ready to be an NFL player, at least playing any sort of significant snaps. Chauncey Rivers was the same way when he was in, and then Dean Lowry and Tyler Lancaster really struggled in the game with below average grades also. I feel like that's a lot of grades in the front, right? Kingsley Keke, Jonathan Garvin, Chauncey Rivers, Dean Lowry, Tyler Lancaster. A lot of those guys playing up front just simply couldn't get the job done. It was such a devastating aspect of trying to get off the field, trying to keep it into some second and third and longs. Saints just didn't find themselves in very many of those situations. Even when they did, they didn't have any hesitancy attacking a defensive backfield that really struggled to communicate. There were multiple coverage breakdowns. You could attack Kevin King. The list just goes on and on. There's nothing that's striking any fear in an offense from this Packers defense right now. That's going to do it for my grades this week. Make sure to check out the full article over on PackerReport.com. It will be free week 1, so you get a free preview of it. The rest of the season, it will be behind a paywall, so make sure to subscribe over at Packer Report. Speaking of subscribing, if you haven't yet, please make sure to do so here on YouTube for the Pack a Day podcast. I would greatly appreciate your support. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode, so make sure not to miss it. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.